Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
What would you do if success gave you everything you thought you wanted and still left you searching for something more? Welcome to Authentic Achievements, the show where we explore what it really takes to succeed without losing yourself along the way. Today's guest has built businesses, served in public office, flown planes, explored some of the world's most remote landscapes, and now turned his passion for history, adventure, and identity into a compelling new novel. Ben Leman is an entrepreneur, rancher, former Texas state representative, and author of Between the Times. Ben, welcome to Authentic Achievements. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Kim. I can see you, but unfortunately, I cannot hear you. I don't see anything that I can do to change that here.
Let me just bear with us while we sort out getting Ben's audio working again. But before he comes back in, which we've got the producer working on now, trying to get those parts sorted. I would really like us to start thinking about whether or not we really understand what success means for us. How many of us have driven a goal of success that is something that was given to us? So we need the right car, the right house, the right job, the right income, but that might not necessarily mean that we're able to still feel successful. Many of the clients that I work with have got that far and they still don't feel fulfilled. Ben, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. I don't know what happened there. I just logged back in and now I can hear you. So
perfect. Well, thank you for logging back in. It's lovely to have you here. And I'm so excited to start this conversation. So Ben, when people look at your life, they'll see a businessman, a rancher, a pilot, a politician, an adventurer, now an author. Looking back across all of those chapters, what do you think has been the thread that connects them all?
I think it's leadership, and the drive to live, just live life. A lot of people stumble through life. I grab life by the horns and I live it. And I think that experience, my past demonstrates that, but that experience gives me a unique perspective into this novel, Between the Times.
I love that. And can I ask, before we delve into the novel, which I really want to get into, was there a moment when you realized that there was that thread there, that thread of leadership? Or did it only become visible looking backwards?
No, I've felt that a long time ago. Some of the leadership roles that I've had have been very strenuous and stressful, and required a lot of effort to be successful. And I knew at the time that I was in a very significant leadership role, and that the skill set I developed in that role played a big part in the success of those various endeavors.
Amazing. And so the move from kind of that business world, thinking about those entrepreneurial elements, taking those adventures and moving that into fiction, that must have been quite a journey. Can you share that with us a little more?
Yeah, sure. It began with a conversation with my mentor, John Denson. He was on his deathbed. He was dying of pancreatic cancer, and it was our last conversation. And he was clear he was not going to continue living at that time. And at the very end of the conversation, he started to fade in and out of consciousness. And so I said my goodbyes and I left. And he yelled at me while I walked out the door, and he said, "Between the tines." And I didn't understand what he said at the time. I turned around, came back to his bedside there, and asked him what he told me, and he repeated that, and I told him I didn't understand, and what is he talking about? What is Between the Tines? And he said, "That's your first book you're going to write, Between the Tines. That's what you're going to call it." And that honestly is the very first time that I thought about writing a book, and I committed that day to writing a book, and didn't know what it was going to be about, but that was in 2013. And here we are, 13 years later. I've brought it to the market, and that was the journey figuring that out. It was a wonderful journey to figure out what I was going to write about, but I've always committed since then in my mind, hey, I am going to write this book, at least one.
Wow. I mean, what an amazing story, and what an amazing legacy to honor that mentorship, to honor that friendship that you had for all those years. And they often say, I believe, that there is a story in all of us, and sometimes we just need that divine intervention almost to push us to bring that out. And I mean, there couldn't be any more divine intervention than somebody yelling the title at you as the last thing that they're going to say, as their ending to that relationship. But how did you go from taking that commitment? So you committed in that moment, you absolutely were honoring the fact that this is what you were going to do in legacy for that friendship. But how did that manifest into what happens next? Because for those people listening and watching, they might have a book in them, but how to get it out is often the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. At first, I really believed that the role was going to be more, or the book was going to be more about leadership, because of my background in those various leadership roles. But as time went forward, and I continued to investigate that as many as well as other options, I ended up very, very fervently committed towards writing this novel, this historical fiction novel that I wrote. And the reason, and it started with a little bit of family research. I was really just interested in my own roots and my own ancestral roots, and it led me to Scotland, where the story quickly branched out, and like a roots in a tree, they just went in, the story went in all kinds of directions, and was very meaningful, very, very, very impacting to the world history, in this broader story at this particular time in the 1640s, which is when it takes place. And so that's when I hooked on to this. That's really when I really understood that the broader story that really hasn't been told before in this fashion. It's just a gripping, very, very engaging story, very impacting, but it's also very relevant to everybody in the world, because at the time there was a huge change in thought going on really across the world, about how to live life. The feudal system was really under fire at the time, and that's when the colonies here in North America were getting going. And so this story everyone can relate to, because throughout history, no matter what country your ancestral roots are from, you know a lot of people came from a lot of different countries over to the United States, and I think that it is very relevant. And at the time, the colonies, very relevant for a lot of people.
I love that, because it's taking that lived experience, isn't it? It's taking those, and so many of them, as you say, are so relevant to today. Those feelings that maybe the way it works currently might not work the same way in the future, and having to be brave enough to try something new. Actually, going back in our history, going back and looking at what's happened to our ancestors and to their ancestors, shows us time and time again that we've had to face these things before. We've had to face those moments of unknown. We've had to face those moments of learning to do something differently, and trusting that. And so I would imagine it's not only relevant, but also gives people a real sense of hope that actually things can change, and that doesn't necessarily mean worse. Doesn't necessarily
Absolutely.
mean loss. It can mean something else.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Absolutely right. I mean, I can't imagine, like, one thing I'm trying to do with this book is connect this new world to the old world.
Yeah.
To inspire people in the way that you're talking about, that things can change, things you can have an impact on this world, and we've seen that time and time again throughout history. And B, but learning where we came from, so you don't repeat history, right? Why did the evolution occur? And so we don't just go right back to the same type of thing. Maybe it might be a different form, but it can be equivalent, so just to be able to see it better. So that is absolutely right. And I can't imagine the decision, the moment when you're making the decision, I'm going to leave my entire way of life as I know it here, where I live every day, and with the people I know and love around me, and go off into this new world where you don't know anybody. There's no infrastructure, there's no economy, there's not much going on with respect to stability or ability to survive. So it really answers the question, what was going on in the world that was so tough and so difficult at the time that people from all over the world were doing that.
It's such an interesting way of looking at it, because I think, what I love about what you've done with it, with this being, particularly with it being a fiction story, is take some of those really big concepts and make them accessible. Because often, we can go and read a fact book, can't we? We can go and read something that will tell us factually what to do, but actually being able to resonate with that, being able to see yourself in that, can feel much harder to do than when somebody fictionalizes it, because we can then engage with the character and then
Right.
start to see a little bit of ourselves potentially in that character, or some similarities. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main goals I had when I wrote the book was for it not to be a history book, just plain history. Because, history can be stale. It can be difficult to engage in the historical facts only, but when you provide the proper entertainment frame in which to include the history, it's much more engaging. It draws people in, and they want to learn more. They want to read more. They want to experience more. And so, if you do it correctly, you are writing this historical fiction book in a way that accomplishes that. And I believe we nailed it. We did a great job doing that.
Amazing. And I can see why that works so well. I mean, we know neuroscientifically that our emotional brain responds 24 times faster than our thinking brain. So if the book only appeals to our thinking side, our emotional side is going to disconnect quite quickly.
Yeah.
So pulling them in, making those characters people that we can invest in, people that
Yeah.
we can emotionally invest in. We want to know what's
Right.
going on for them. We want to see where this ends for them. Allows us to take both sides of our brain on that journey. So our thinking brain still gets fed, it still learns stuff it didn't know before.
Right.
It's our emotional brain that actually connects us to the story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's not easy to do. That's not what we're talking about. Is not an easy concept to accomplish. In fact, for me, I rewrote that the first draft. I've completed it, and then I rewrote it twice,
Wow.
and it was in the effort of accomplishing exactly what we're talking about, trying to make the characters' personalities and dialogue and interactions and thoughts reflect the undertone, the seriousness of the undertone, but while maintaining the entertaining aspect of the story that I'm trying to use to draw people in. So it is complicated, and I guess every writer, every author has their own strategies. For me, the more I wrote this historical fiction novel, I continued my journey of investigating what was going on at the time, to learn more about the details in the moment that I was writing. And in doing so, my undertone. I became clearer and clearer on incorporating other aspects that I was learning into this story, and it kind of changed the dynamics a little bit more from an entertainment side in the beginning, my first draft, to more of a serious undertone that really I honed in and figured out the underlying themes that I really wanted to drive home to the reader. And then I made sure the personalities and dialogue and thoughts of the characters match that, and that required me to rewrite it quite a bit and really go deep into the thoughts and minds of the characters.
Amazing. So it's really multi-dimensional, isn't it? There's so many layers in what you've just described.
Yeah.
In getting the first draft, I mean, that's tough enough, as we know.
Yeah.
Right. First, and then realizing actually that really is in its truest form a draft. You know, that's giving you the kind of framework within which the end story is going to end up. But the reality, once you go into those extra layers, once you invest in understanding those characters, understanding what's the message that is theirs to bring to the world, can significantly alter, can't it, how that brings itself to life. So dedicating yourself to doing that and to being willing to be wrong is, for me, when I was doing it, that was one of the things that once I got past that was made everything else easier. That piece that's very like, am I overthinking, or am I just really thinking to, does this feel right? Does this feel like this is how that person might be or think or say? And what comes next? What do you think you learned most in that process? Because that is such a big process to go through.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And it is a difficult learning curve for a lot of people. I mean, it's easy to create something and rubber stamp it as quality when it's your own product, right? Stepping back and looking at your own product objectively and being critical of it, and making sure that you objectively look at it and say, did I miss the mark or did I hit it here? That is challenging. That's difficult to do, because you're right. You can overthink it. You can underthink it as well. And so knowing where you are on that spectrum is critical. And I attribute that, for me, I attribute that to my experience as a leader, in my business life and the rest of my experiences that you mentioned. Part of the success of those was surrounding myself with people that could be honest with me, and were probably more talented than I was in many ways, and so you listen objectively to those pieces of advice, but you're the one that has to pull, all the advice together and find a common area, that, a lot of the advice will overlap, but those are components of it, right? Of the total picture. And so then you find the resolution, which is the decision on how to move forward. And it may not look like any of them individually, but it can be a result of a combination of them, or it can be a combination of them. So the same thing applied with my writing. I did have some beta readers that helped me assess my abilities to meet the mark, to hit it where I wanted to hit it. And through our dialogue, through our discussions, I had to conclude whether I did or not. And so being honest with yourself and understanding what you're trying to achieve, understanding your goal, those were the two main components, I would say.
Amazing. And there's so much in that I'd like us to get into and unpack. We are about to take a brief break to hear from one of our sponsors. And when we come back, what I'd really like to delve into is how you learned that. You made it sound so simple, and yet I know from experience is not that simple. Being able to take all of those threads of information, all of those opinions that are there, and to be confident enough to make a decision when clarity might not always be fully there. We might not be as clear as we would like it to be. It's not always as nice as there's path A and path B. We can see which they are. There's twists and turns along the route. So when we come back shortly, I would love to delve into that a little bit more deeply with you, Ben.
Yeah, you bet. Look forward to it.
Fantastic. See you in a...
Every great story begins with a vision. At USA Global TV and Radio, for years, we've been providing world-class education, entertainment, inspiration, imagination, connections, and hope. Most people don't stay to watch the outro or the credits, but it's the people behind every success, behind every breakthrough, and behind every unforgettable story who matter. The TV show hosts, our guests, our sponsors, our publicists, our production team, our distribution team, our search engine optimization team, and so many more. You're the ones who make the difference. Every great story belongs to the people who bring it to life. Our future looks bright at USA Global TV and Radio, and that's because of you, our loyal fan base all around the world in more than 60 countries. Together, we're making a difference because you matter. USA Global TV and Radio, live streaming to over 60 countries. Voiceover, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Video production and direction, Paul Garcia. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV and Radio on YouTube.
Amazing. Thanks to our sponsor and to the fabulous Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, who is the founder and chief listening officer here at USA Global TV and Radio. And that segue really is perfect for bringing Ben back in, because as we've just seen in that short advert, the story starts with a vision and belongs to the people that bring it to life. So Ben, before we went to that quick commercial break, we were talking about that. How do you gain the confidence to take the decision that might not be so clear? You know, when you're starting off with the journey of writing your book, as you've shared before, it didn't end in the way that you first thought it was going to end. It didn't end up there. You had to gather information along the way from your own thinking, from your own research, but also from feedback from people that were reading bits of it and sharing their thoughts, their ideas, I guess their takeaways from it. So how do you go about sifting through all of that information, which, as you said, probably comes from your skills as a leader, sifting through that information to be able to make the decision with confidence, even when there isn't necessarily clarity?
Right. I mean, so what I did is I treated it just like my business background, you know, how I ran my company, which is we were a manufacturing company that I started and built up, and we built it to a pretty sizable entity. And in that endeavor, you know, there's no more valuable feedback, no more accurate feedback than your customers, right? Your customers are going to tell you, I like your product or I do not like your product. And that's how I approached writing this story, which was I chose about 10 beta readers that I felt were my target audience, men and women both, because I wanted to make sure I appealed to both. And they all had different opinions. It wasn't like they all said the same thing. Everybody's looking for different results of or different lessons they're learning or different takeaways from the novel. So it was my job to take their input, combine it with my own honesty and an objective assessment of what I felt I was doing, and then make adjustments accordingly. And that is what I did. Sifting through it, I did not take everybody's advice. You know, you'll end up with a jumbled mess. You'll lose focus of your goals if you take everybody's advice on everything. So I had to sift through that, like you said, find the commonalities, find the overwhelming evidence. If all of your customers are saying, hey, you missed the mark with this character, hey, you missed the mark with this character, you know, you probably missed the mark with that character, whether you believe you did or not. You may not understand it, you may not realize it, you may not get it, but you missed the mark. And so that was my approach, and that's how I reconcile all of that and produced various drafts to end up where we were at.
Amazing. I love that. And I love you particularly that, the one you've just shared with us, if you've missed the mark with that character, because one of the things I'd love your take on this, that we can sometimes do is there's assumed knowledge. We've lived with it so much, whether that's in the business world or whether it's in writing. We've been living with the information for so much that we think it's clear to all, when in reality, there's some assumed knowledge that we have that the other person needs for them to be able to meet the same conclusion. Would that be fair?
More than fair, more than fair. I would add to that, I think there's assumed knowledge that when you're writing various drafts and you've thought through this story so deeply and so broadly, you have all the circumstantial, evidence, all the surrounding knowledge that's there. But you also, which is what you're referring to, where you also get confused. It's confusing when you rewrite drafts and you had something in your story and then you take it out, right? You take it out, and when you take that component out, you have to go through the story and remove every reference to that component that you took out in the thread of the story. So you know you're sitting there, and through time, and you make a lot of changes, you lose track of, well, wait, did I take that out, or is that part of the story, is it not? So you that assumed knowledge you're talking about gets commingled with components that have been removed that you might even forget are removed. And so having a fresh set of eyes coming in and saying, hey, how did you get from point A to point B with this character? It's not making sense to me, so it's those types of things that help. Absolutely.
So it made me smile. It reminds me of many years ago, an old tutor of mine was like, Kim, beware rabbits out of hats. And because I would have removed some of those things, but not removed them all the way along, as you say. And therefore I'd go A to Z and they'd be like,
yeah,
I'm lost as the reader. I'm lost.
Right. Right.
And we've possibly all been in that place, haven't we, where we're reading a book, and let's stick with fiction. We're reading a fiction book, and all of a sudden something crops up, and you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And then I have to go back a few pages in case I missed it. I'm like, did I not read that properly? And then I've been duped if it wasn't signposted to me. It just did appear. I'm like, oh, that's not very fair, because now I've lost my thread in the book. So that is a real commitment when you're doing the amount of rewriting that you're doing, to look at it through that lens of the reader, isn't it? The person who's going to receive the product, and to your point earlier, hopefully love the product and become a massive advocate of it and go, this was worth me spending my money and time to invest in this story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it becomes critical that process you're talking about of the reader, observing, reading through the book and it making sense. It becomes critical when you're talking about character development. If you're really trying to convince the reader of your underlying themes, of what's the transition in the school of thought of the character, then you have to bring that reader along through the thought process of that character. And that's a timeline. That's a series of events or thoughts or conversations that occur in an evolution of thought, over time. And so that is very important, that you can't just jump, because I think you lose the readers at that point. It becomes unconvincing. You're not convincing the reader of the validity of the evolution of thought that you're trying to demonstrate. You're just jumping from point A to point B, and they're okay. Here we are. We were on the Earth, and now we're on the moon. Well, how did we get there? So, I think it is critical.
Amazing. And it is so crucial, isn't it, that we create a path people can follow, so that they feel too that they are on the journey as well. So in between the times, what would you say has been the greatest gift writing that story has done for you, given you?
Yeah, I think perhaps the greatest gift that it's given me is to understand that the big question we kind of opened this whole discussion with is what was going on in this world at that time that created such a movement of concern for people that they were willing to change their lives and change the world, change the way the world operated, to throw off in many countries, many areas, a lot of countries changed, at that time, around that time. And but that was kind of the beginning of that time period where it really, really changed. And so this was kind of the spark that kind of ignited that in many ways. That was my biggest takeaway, and understanding today where we are as a world. I mean, I think everybody understands and would agree that as a world we have more freedoms and opportunities today than we did in the 1640s. But it didn't come easy, and it wasn't necessarily a pretty path that got there, or a perfect path. I mean, there's still ugly things about this world that we all have to endure and hear about and participate in, and live in, exist in. But learning from that is critical, and I think that's the biggest takeaway: is understanding where we came from at the time as a world, and so that we can continue on a path forward in the right direction.
That's great, because it is that almost we've got to see how far we've come to have the courage to know how much further we can go.
Yeah, sure.
And it sounds like
Absolutely.
that's what your story's doing. It's
Yes.
helping us to learn from the past, to learn from when we were brave, when we were courageous, when we did have very different fears and probably hopes back then than we did today. But even so, we were able to be brave enough and courageous enough to take those leaps, to push forward, and to take that leap into the unknown, which is kind of what we all do every day, isn't it? We leap into the unknown of what today is going to bring, because the world is ever moving, ever evolving. And sometimes we can feel overwhelmed with the pace of change. And what strikes me about your book is that although the pace was very different back in the 1640s, the magnitude of decisions, the magnitude of courage that was needed actually was no different than what's needed today.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about just as significant of change in the way we live today as it was back then. Very different changes, obviously. But, you think of the impacts of AI, artificial intelligence. You think of all the talk about, going to Mars and communities on the moon. I mean, those are the significant developments with technology today, that we're talking about. And just as changing to our daily lives and how we live, as somebody who grew up in the 80s, with no cell phones and anything like that. It's very similar to what we're talking about in the 1640s or in the Industrial Revolution time, period. These are major historical events that cause fundamental changes in the way we live our lives. And so, yeah, that courage, that determination, that in this case, also there's a component of desperation, right? They were desperate for changing, finding a better life, a better way of life in some instances. So yeah, definitely, I agree.
Amazing. And bringing it back, as you've already done once for us, but to that question at the start, it strikes me when we think about, the definition of success, what it is we're looking for, and whether or not we've achieved a level of success and still found it a little bit lacking. It strikes me that when we think about your book, Between the Times, and the story that's taking on, they were looking that they probably had a version of success they've been working towards that all of a sudden was no longer fulfilling, was no longer meeting their base needs, and that actually something meant that needed to change. And that's not dissimilar to where we see ourselves today, is it? So have you ever experienced that, where you've achieved everything you set out to achieve. You have, on paper, ticked all of the boxes of success, but still found yourself feeling unfulfilled, feeling like there was something that wasn't quite fitting.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think that anybody that tries to grab life by the horns and live it, and wrestle that life, bend it, this world to your will, so to speak, I think you always have that itch, and it doesn't matter. There's never the, okay, I've checked the final box moment, right, where I can now just sit back on the porch and just sit there and feel fulfilled. uh, I've never felt that my life has been completely fulfilled. I'm always wanting to push forward and do more, do better, and live that adventure, experience something that I haven't experienced, and succeed at it. It's just, I think it's kind of fundamental in my DNA, how I approach life, and I think it's like that for a lot of people, and so yeah, that's basically how I've approached it, and I have felt at time, every time I've made the milestone, check the one box that I was working on, I reached that considerating, or the consideration of that, the consideration you're mentioning, which is, what next? Am I done? Am I going to move forward? And that's what's driven me to go into, being a CEO of a manufacturing company, to going into elected office and serving the public for 10 years, to going off on all these adventures, hunting in the mountains, or fishing in the remote areas of Alaska, and uh, doing all kinds of projects that I do in those remote areas. And now writing a novel, being a pilot, all those things are trying to live life to the fullest, trying to grab life and live it. And so now I'm on also doing another business, so another manufacturing company. So yeah, it's never ending.
I love that. It's that sense of making the most of every single day. My nan used to say, make every day a school day. And my granddad said, live each day as if it's your last, and one day you'll be right. And somewhere between those two, I think they kind of summed up life, which is,
Yeah.
learn something in every day, push yourself to develop, to grow, to do something, but also don't put off till tomorrow what can be done today, because tomorrow's not promised. And
Absolutely.
I just think that's how you live your life, and that's how you brought this book to life. And I'm very conscious that as the show starts to come towards an end, I want to ensure that everybody listening and watching has an opportunity to understand how they can get the book. We've got it up on the screen now, obviously showing it at Amazon. But you also mentioned, Ben, briefly, but I picked up on it, that this was the first novel. So
Yeah.
do you have plans for more?
Yes. This is a trilogy. This is book one of a trilogy. Forged in Blood is the trilogy, and Forged in Blood refers to our way of life right today as we live it. It did not come easy, and it was through a lot of tremendous effort and sacrifice from a lot of people around this world. And so, Between the Times is book one. Book two, I'm currently in the researching phase of, and it's Behind the Mask is what it's called. That's the title of it. And it will pick up where book one left off and continue this journey forward in a very different way. But so it's not going to be like, a similar read of all the environment of things of nature in which the story takes place, but it's going to be just as engaging in a very different way. And so some of the characters from book one will continue to develop in book two, and there'll be other characters that are involved and take a bigger role in book two, but it's going to be just as exciting, just as engaging, and thrilling. So I'm working on the outline phase of it. I have started it, the beginning of it, and but I'm really still in the heavy research phase of it.
Amazing. Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing Between the Times, and also sharing what comes next. And I hope that you will come back and share with us when the second book of the trilogy and again the third are available for people to read. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your story, and your learnings. I appreciate it.
You bet. And it's benlemanauthor.com. That's where you can go on and follow my social media or learn more about the book. benlemanauthor.com.
Perfect. And all of those links, including how to get the book, are in the notes below. So if you just have a look directly below where I am now, you'll be able to find all those ways to connect with Ben, to get the book, and to get involved in Between the Times and the start of that trilogy. To everybody listening and watching, I hope you found today's show to be as interesting, thought-provoking, and inspiring as I have. And until next time, take care.
People are searching for experts every day. Are they finding you, or are they finding someone else? Every day, professionals are building authority through media. We've already built the platform. USA Global TV and Radio. Over 14,000 shows streamed to over 60 countries. This isn't about becoming famous. It's about leverage, visibility, credibility, opportunity. One interview, one conversation, one show, repurposed into content, connection, and business growth. Most people assume hosting a TV show requires a studio, a production team, and a massive budget. Our television packages begin at $1,500 US per month. Professional production, global distribution, replay visibility, built for voices with something to say. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and if this resonates with you, we should talk. USA Global TV and Radio, all rights reserved. Contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com.
How much of your value have you been giving away? Saying yes when the answer should have been no? Lowering your price to secure the opportunity? Giving more while receiving less? Over time, it adds up. Until one moment brings clarity, you've been giving away your value. This is not about working harder. This is not about doing more. It's about boundaries. It's about pricing. It's about respect. From Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck comes a direct and necessary message. Stop over-delivering. Stop underpricing your expertise. Stop negotiating against yourself. Because when you recognize your value, everything changes. Stop giving away your value. Boundaries, pricing, and the business of respect. Available now wherever fine books are sold and on Amazon. A film by USA Global TV and Radio. Executive producer Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Videographer and cinematic production Paul Garcia. Voiceover by Ed Wargas. Stop giving it away. Start owning it.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.